Good evening, folks, and welcome to the Horror Corner. I'm your host, Sean Patrick Erschen, and this week we are taking a look back at one of my favorite slasher movies of the new millennium, and that is Wolf Creek, directed by Greg McLean, starring Kestie Morassi, Cassandra Magrath, and Nathan Phillips, and also, of course, let's not forget John Jarratt as the maniac Mick Taylor. That's right, the Australian outback killer. This is actually based on true events of a couple of different cases. I'd say loosely based on a couple of major cases from Australia. One of them being the serial killer Ivan Milat, who was apprehended back in the 90s. And is still in jail to this day for his crimes. Another one being in the early 2000s, Bradley Murdoch, who abducted a young couple, tourists. And yeah, so I say loosely based in the way like they say Texas Chainsaw Massacre was loosely based on the exploits of serial killer Ed Gein. And it's just an awesome movie. I absolutely love it. I think John Jarratt is absolutely brilliant as the killer Mick Taylor. So what happens is we meet this young group of kids. They're like in their maybe 18, 19, 20s. And they go on a hitchhiking up to this national park called Wolf Creek, where there's a meteor site. A giant crater caused by a meteor back in the day. And they just want to hang out there, get stoned, get bombed, have a good time, camp out. And what happens is their car stalls out. This shit box that this kid, Ben, bought, it's like a piece of crap that stalled out. And they're stuck in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of Wolf Creek. And this guy comes along in his truck. Seems like a nice guy. He really seems like he knows the highway of Australia. He knows his way around the desert and the wilderness. But he just seems like a nice old hermit, So what happens is he says, I can help you out. The car is undrivable. I have some parts. I have the parts to fix it, but it's back in my camp. Which is quite a whiles away, according to him. But he can get it fixed, up and running, and have them off in no time. So they decide to do that. And they all in the truck with Mick, and they're falling asleep. And when they wake up, it's like they look around and the truck's driving in the pitch black night, and they look around and there's absolutely nothing anywhere. They realize they're in the middle of absolutely nowhere. There's nothing around. And they're like, well, he did say it would be a while, let's give him the benefit of the doubt. So they're all like, yeah, it's fine. So they go back to sleep, and then they wake up and they're at Mick's hideaway. And they're all fucking around, talking, drinking, having a good time, Mick seems like a real fun guy, he tells some crazy stories about killing pigs and, about his job, and they just start laughing, and this kid, Ben, kind of makes a joke to him, kind of makes fun of him a little bit. He's like, wow, it must be great to have all this freedom, you get to say cool stuff like, that's no knife, that's a knife. I was like, oh no, he didn't just go there, did he? And then Mick gives him a look of absolute death, like, dude. And I think it's brilliant. It's almost like Oscar worthy. He gives this look like, the fuck are you talking about? And the dude's just like, it just gives you a cold chill down your spine, and you get a little bit of insight into the madman that is Mick Taylor. This ain't just some fucking Crocodile Dundee dude. This dude is a seriously demented and disturbed individual. And the crazy thing is, he's smart. He is whip smart. He does know the highways and byways of the outback. He knows everything about it. He knows everything about weapons and how to survive in the wilderness. But he also is a mentally disturbed individual. He wants to rape and torture and pillage these youngsters in the middle of the wilderness. And that's his plan, and that's exactly what he does. And it's really scary and creepy. So they all decide, this dude's girlfriend Liz is like, what are you're an idiot. Why are you talking to this guy like that? This guy's trying to help us, and you're making fun of him. Did you see the look on his face? And he's like, it's nothing, no problem. And they all decide to camp out, go to sleep, and when they wake up in hell, basically. The girl wakes up, the girl Lizzie is all tied up and gagged, They're like, what the fuck is going on? So she does manage to cut through the bondage and takes the gag off, and she peeks through the door and sees that her friend is actually being tortured and harassed and sexually abused by this maniac Mick Taylor. Who's got a knife on her, a gun on her, and he's talking shit, and he's completely terrorizing her, and she's absolutely horrified, screaming her brains out, and the girl Lizzie is just like, oh my god, I gotta do something to help her. So she does break away, and she manages to get her girlfriend Kestie out of there, and she does just that. They get off, they steal Mick's truck, and they drive off in the middle of the night, horrified, scared to death. But Mick does find out, and he gets in his other truck and chases them. But the girls get far enough away from him that they decide, maybe we'll just ditch the truck so he can't trace us, and throw it off a cliff, and maybe he'll think we died, and then they can get away. And so yeah, he discovers that the truck drove off the cliff, and he's got a flashlight in there, like hiding on the side of the cliff, but of course they don't see him. So then the girls do manage to get away from him, and then the girl Lizzie decides that, I gotta go back there, I gotta try to save Ben, because Ben is still back there at his camp. So she has the bright idea to go back to Mick's camp, the scene of hell, the scene of the crime. She decides to go back there and leave Kestie alone in the middle of the wilderness, in the middle of fucking nowhere in the desert, by herself. A real genius idea. So Liz does go back to the camp, and she tries to find Ben. But what she does find is a whole shitload of cars in Mick's garage. So she starts it up, and it does start. I know in a lot of these movies the car doesn't start, but it does start. The problem is Mick is in the back seat, so he stabs right through the front seat, and he gets her. And so the girl Lizzie falls out of the car, and then and then Mick says, "Oh, just like your mate said, right?" And the girl pulls out a little fucking pocket knife she found, which happens to belong to her boyfriend. And he's like, "Just like your little mate said, huh? That's no knife, that's a knife." Little Crocodile Dundee for you. He doesn't even know what that means, but he just thought it was funny. So then he just begins to describe, back in the day, I'm going to show you a little trick called head on a stick. So he grabs the girl, picks her up, stabs her in the back and rips her right through her spine. And then he just drops her on the ground, and she's just completely paralyzed and with a complete look of absolute terror on her face. And she can't move because he paralyzed her and by cutting through her spine. And they said, because that's what you are, just a head on a stick. Now tell me where Kestie is. So then he goes after Kestie and finds her, and Kestie manages to stumble upon a road, and there's a nice old man that helps her and is trying to take her in, trying to get her away. And then he gets his freaking head blown off. All you hear is and then she looks and the dude's dead. Because Mick is a nasty shot. He's an absolute marksman with a rifle. This guy's fucking for real. Let me tell you, he knows everything about... He knows his way around weapons and knives and guns and your typical survival stuff. And so she decides to get in the car and drive away, and Mick follows right her. She's stuck in this little old rickety ass station wagon, and he's got a badass, you know, fast car like a Dodge Charger or something, like a real fast car, and he's just like messing around with her. He drives next to her, he's fucking with her, sticking his tongue out at her, you know. And she slams him off the road. And it becomes a really thrilling chase. It's awesome. And you think maybe this girl might get away. Maybe she'll be the survivor girl, like a Laurie Strode type, you know, character that gets away from the madman. But he, as soon as she drives off, he gets out of the car, blasts the tires out from the car, and the whole car rolls like 3 or 4 times, and she gets out, and Mick is right there with the rifle, right in the back. She does not get away. There's no survivor girl in this movie. Okay, this is not your typical slasher from the early 80s. The survivor girl does not exist. But we do find that Ben is still there, and he's still alive back at Mick's camp. And so we cut to Ben, and he's actually crucified against the wall. He's got nails pinned in his wrist, and he's hanging there. So he's absolutely terrified, and he does his best to pull his arms right off of the nails. So he does manage to get away, and he does manage to escape the camp, and he does go off into the wilderness on his own, and he does end up stumbling upon a road where this couple does get him, and he does manage to escape. He gets away, the police take him away, and he gets sent to the hospital, and he ends up surviving. So there's actually a survivor guy in the movie, not a girl. So a little twist there on the slasher tropes that we all know. The survivor is actually a man. And he managed, and he does tell the police about his story, but where he didn't know where the hell he was, or he didn't know any of the details really of what the hell happened, because he was pretty much sleeping the whole time. So no bodies are found, nothing is ever found, no killer is found. And then we see the silhouette at the end of the movie. We see Mick in the shadow walking away with his rifle in hand. And that's how the movie ends. It leaves it wide open for a sequel, which we did get, Wolf Creek 2. And as well as a TV series, which was on Pop TV. Also excellent, and also did star the great John Jarratt as Mick Taylor. Also an excellent TV show, so check that out. Check Wolf Creek 2 out. Is also awesome. It's even more brutal than the first one. But Wolf Creek, folks, it's an absolutely awesome slasher flick based loosely on true events. It's just an awesome slasher movie. It's absolutely thrilling, with great performance by John Jarratt as Mick Taylor, one of the greatest slasher killers of all time, in my opinion. Definitely, I'd say he's like the new Freddy Krueger. You know, he's that good and that charismatic and that smart and he does come up with a few one-liners there now and then, like a Freddy Krueger. He's like a mentally deranged outback killer. It's really scary. The movie is so competently directed by Greg McLean, and everyone in the film gives a fine performance. It's brutal, it's gruesome, it's bloody, it's nasty, it's gritty, and it's awesome. So run and buy Wolf Creek, guys. It's an absolutely awesome slasher flick. And thank you very much for joining me, Sean Patrick Erschen, in the Horror Corner. Tune in and stay scared.